You know, something happened at the conclusion of week one that I never thought going in. I actually have more questions after week one than I did going in. Is it possible to actually come away from playing 4 quarters of a regular season game and have more questions than before the game even kicked off? That's sort of a rhetorical question. For Darren Urban, Dani Sureck, yours truly, Paulie Podcast, we'll get into all that. You know, the biggest leap isn't from year 1 to year 2. It's from week 1 to week 2. You got to make adjustments, okay? And apparently, based on the game plan that I'm seeing here, we are going to make some adjustments upcoming, foreshadowing here on Cardinals Underground. Dani, you're ready to take over what's sure to be an exciting / entertaining / highly competitive edition of a brand new game within the game.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But we're not going to get to that quite yet.
Oh, okay. All right. Because we're going to start with week 1 in Buffalo, are we not?
Yeah, I want you to answer your rhetorical question.
Oh, I have a lot of questions.
I know. I want to hear your answer to your rhetorical question.
Do you really? Okay, first of all, when you say you have a lot of questions after week 1, you talking about Cardinals specific, or are you talking about the league in general?
Yeah, you could hit zoom out and say the league. I mean, the only real answer I think we have in the NFL as a whole is that the Carolina Panthers will be picking number 1. Other than that, it is wide open.
I don't know. I feel pretty confident that the 49ers are going to be pretty low in the draft order.
Yeah, that 49ers exhibition, they ran for 180 without Christian McCaffrey. Jordan Mason just gets plugged in and rushes for $148 or whatever it was.
Yeah, in one of my fantasy leagues I have, Christian McCaffrey, and Darren yells over to me at my desk that he was inactive. And when I was upset because obviously there was no one else to play, I didn't have any other running back on the Jets or the 49ers. And I asked Darren if I could leave work early and go home, and he said, no, that was not a good enough reason.
I did say that.
Yeah. The strength of the NFC West is not a question. It's going to be good. There's no doubt.
I think I saw some next-level analytics that actually said, like, in terms of expected play average for both offense and defense. I mean, obviously the Cardinals didn't have quite as good of a game as they would have liked, but they were still in the positive for offense. And I think everybody in the division was ahead of the game in terms of, when you look at everybody in the division, I think they were the only division where everybody was in some sort of positive.
By the way, did you see NFL Next Gen Stats? They have debuted their own innovation for 2024. They're now quantifying tackling. So we'll get to that a little bit later. They say they can go ahead and assess tackling. Who's the best at tackling? Who's the best at breaking tackles?
Like individuals?
Individuals. So I just found that. They just posted that earlier today. We'll get into that a little bit later. Well, yeah, if you want to hit zoom out, Cardinals losing a tight game at Buffalo. I mean, the whole, going before the game started versus after the game. If we would have said before the game, you went into Buffalo and you lost by 6 points, a team with the quarterback who's number 2 in MVP odds, a team that's been to the playoffs 6 straight years and has gone pretty deep into the playoffs. Okay, all right, a competitive Cardinals team on the road against the Buffalo Bills. It was the fact that you took a 17-3 lead and then ended up on the short end, 34-26.
I wasn't necessarily surprised by the first half. I went in really thinking it was going to be a close game, just looking at the quarterback matchups and offensive pieces, and thought it was going to be really come down to how the defense held up. And the fact that they forced a turnover I thought was huge, and the Cardinals capitalized on that, scoring on their first 3 drives. After seeing what we saw in the first half, it was clearly different in the second. The Cardinals were not able to move the chains, were not able to capitalize. Kyler Murray not able to connect with his receivers, whether that's on his end or the receivers or what the defense was showing. I will say, to a certain extent, given the defense a little slack, is Josh Allen is Josh Allen. And there's a reason the Bills have been competitive every year that he's been in Buffalo. His ability to evade the sacks and the pressure and extend plays. And regardless of who he has out wide, even if it's not a top wide receiver like Gabe Davis or Stephon Diggs, who the Bills are without this year, finds a way to get it done.
I
You mean he's not the most overrated player in the league, like that anonymous poll declared?
I mean, I'm watching that game and I'm thinking to myself, and again, one game, but I'm watching that game thinking Josh Allen has a chance to be Patrick Mahomes from last year, which is you look at some of his offensive weapons and you're thinking, oh, okay. And then he carries them a long way because he looked fantastic. And I think the Cardinals did a great job of essentially taking away Dalton Kincaid, the great tight end. And he still made things happen. And, I know people are going to argue with me, whatever, but aside from the stats or the analytics, from what I saw in my eyes, I mean, one of the reasons he was making so many plays with his legs, because I thought for what the Cardinals were trying to do to get pressure on him, I thought they did that sometimes. Unfortunately, he broke contain too many times, and then it happened. But it's funny, you talk about all the questions you have. I'll be honest. One, the two biggest things I took away were, one, I definitely felt more negative about that performance in the moments after than I did Monday when I started thinking about a lot of stuff. And then two, when I look at questions, I'm like, the only thing that really was like, wow, I did not expect that, was the Marvin Harrison 3 targets, 1 catch. I don't think there was anything else that really was like, oh, wow. Not to me.
Well, first off, on Josh Allen, he's like this maddening combination of Big Ben and Steve Young.
Yes.
Right? I mean, dudes can be dripping off him and hitting him, and he's still getting the pass away.
I mean, he's a large man, Paul.
Or he could just be running through the open field, making guys miss, trucking dudes, campaigning for calls that he got. We'll get into that a little bit later.
Oh, let's not go there.
As to your point about the tight ends, my keys to the game, right, that I had going in.
We got a keychain with the key.
Yeah.
You took it out of the package.
Yes, and now there's a keychain, so my key to the game going in was the tight ends, both of them. How could the Cardinals defend Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid? They had 1 catch apiece.
Yeah.
And then the Cardinals with Trey McBride against no Matt Milano, brand new safeties, backup inside linebackers, and the Cardinals couldn't maximize that either.
No.
His longest catch was 8 yards.
Yeah.
He was kind of a non-factor. But yeah, in terms of questions, I guess, the Marvin Harrison Jr. one, yeah, that leads the power poll. We'll get into that in a minute. But still, you want to hit there's other questions. Individual players, like other new guys and additions, the Bilal Nichols, Justin Jones, Sean Murphy-Bunting.
Justin Jones with the fumble recovery.
Sure. A Max Melton didn't have a great Pro Football Focus grade. Xavier Thomas, who was in the rotation, they were counting on him. There's a lot of questions there. There's still a lot of questions in my mind. Tell me if I'm off base here. The Cardinals' ability to beat cloud coverage, these shell coverages.
Oh, I think that's
which
fair.
has been an ongoing narrative for 2 or 3 years now.
Okay, I guess that's why I need to clarify. You're talking about questions that you still want answers, and I was talking more about I'm not surprised at anything that I have seen yet.
Yeah, there's questions on personnel. There's questions on what exactly is going to be the identity on both sides of the ball. There's questions, are they going to be able to generate enough pass rush to, what JG says, affect the quarterback? You thought there was enough pass rush in that game?
I mean, to me, again, I would have to go watch it again. Obviously, you strongly disagree, Paul.
Well, especially in the second half, probably the second, third, and fourth quarter, I just thought Josh Allen had far too much time.
Maybe. I guess I just saw way too many completions on broken plays and where he was on the move that told me, they weren't bootlegs he was moving on. They were moving because they got enough people in there that he was not comfortable standing where he was standing, and then moved, and then eventually found a guy. Now, if you want to talk about them not being able to get to him soon enough to prevent him from throwing the pass, that's different to me.
Even the Roy Lopez sack, do we agree, was a coverage sack? I mean, that was
he had a lot of time.
Yeah.
Although somebody said he had a wide open guy, which sounds familiar, but nobody got on his case about it, and just missed him, and that's the only reason Lopez got there.
Okay. Yeah, and then the other sack was Keitrell Clark. It was basically he fell down before.
It was the one where Josh Allen. It was going to be called a run because Mark Dalton was the PR guy, was talking to the official scorers in the thing. It was going to be a run. Well, it was a pass, and then he ran. It was like that 3rd and long late in the game, and because Josh Allen wanted the horse collar on Keitrell on that play.
Yep, that's right.
And he got taken down short of the line of scrimmage. And Mark argued successfully that it should have been a sack because it was a pass play, and he never made it to the line of scrimmage.
Could I say Josh Allen campaigns for more calls than LeBron James? No, I won't say that.
Look, if we're going to bring this up, I'm going to say real quickly, both the play early in the game that was a bad call that benefited the Cardinals on the hit by Kyler, and the Zaven Collins lost sack, which was a bad call. Both of those in real time, the way the quarterbacks moved was, I absolutely understand why a flag was called. And if you can't look again in slow-mo like we all did and see that they were both bad calls, I'm not going to get on the officials for that, because the Kyler one, the way he fell, his head hit the turf, it looked like he got hit. He did not. And then the Josh Allen one, I thought in real time, I'm like, that doesn't look good. But then you watch the replay, and it was just a funky play that shouldn't have been a penalty. I can't get mad at the officials for throwing flags, especially when it can't be reviewed.
It is deceiving in real time. I mean, that play was from here to the wall for me, Kyler, and his head bounced up, and it was really him hitting the turf. Yes. It wasn't the defender hitting him.
No.
It was deceiving. There's no doubt about that. All right, Marvin Harrison Jr., where are we on this? Who is he? We don't know yet. What sort of system does he need to be in?
There's a senior, and he's definitely the junior.
How different will it look this week? Jonathan Gannon on Arizona Sports hinting, there might be the innovation of getting him in motion a little bit more, getting him on the move. I think you'll see him in different spots on the offense. What can you do? What will they do to free Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Finished with 1 reception off 3 targets for 4 yards. I would expect they continue to get him involved in the game much more than he was this first week. And I would imagine it was a combination of things. The first target to the sideline, which was behind Harrison, I think there was a safety that you couldn't really tell until the slow-mo replay of why Kyler didn't throw it up in front of him over the back shoulder. And then the drop. And the drop was a good pass. Harrison had it in his hands. I think that was probably just nerves of your first game. And I liked that the immediate next play was not scripted. Kyler found Harrison. And maybe that was just the best read, and it's likely that is the case.
Well, that's what they keep telling us.
But I do think that it probably helped of, okay, you're in the game, shake it off, mentally stay in this for the rookie. We were told by Gannon and by offensive coordinator Drew Petzing that they were respecting Harrison as a rookie, maybe a lot more than they initially anticipated for week 1, of making sure they essentially had him double teamed for majority of the game. And then you throw in the fact that it was windy. It was funky weather. It would be sunny and then it was overcast and the wind would get really intense. And I think that played a role in what they wanted to do in the air. So I would expect that they target Harrison more than they did in this first game. Now that you have maybe the nerves, or you kind of figured some stuff out of, this was the first time they played together. Now, if they had played a handful of preseason snaps, I'm not in the camp of it would have looked drastically different. I don't know how much that would really have provided. But it's a fair question that's been brought up to the coordinators and the head coach of, you have your 4th overall pick, you have this big-time rookie, and didn't really make much of an impact. To his defense, none of the wide receivers really did.
Paul, you're going to know this. I mean, it feels very deja vu, because I can tell you when we were talking to Jonathan Gannon this week on Monday, and after the game, but on Monday, and then Drew Petzing on Tuesday, about getting the ball. Why aren't you getting the ball to your top receiver more? I had absolute flashbacks from that room of asking Ken Wisenhunt / Bruce Arians / Steve Wilkes / Cliff Kingsbury, why are you not getting the ball more to Larry Fitzgerald? This is not the and right. And before people want to jump on Petzing and or Gannon about, like, when they talk about you go through your progressions and get the ball where it needs to be, I just want to remind everybody that is what Ken Wisenhunt / Bruce Arians / Steve Wilkes / Cliff Kingsbury said about Larry Fitzgerald, and so did the That said, obviously you need to get the ball to your playmaker, and they've got to do a better job. But I want a bigger sample size than one game. I understand why people are reacting the way they are and all this stuff, but preseason wouldn't have made a difference. I'm sorry. Everybody's going to get all up and feeling some kind of way, but Kyler Murray was not going to play in the preseason, so I don't think that changes anything there. Maybe Marvin was a little nervous, but
even if they did play, they'd see vanilla coverages.
Yes.
Would they have seen what they experienced against Buffalo with the cloud coverage? And I mean, could I argue that Marvin Harrison Jr. had one catch for 4 yards on a measly 3 targets, and it worked? It worked in one way. He got extra attention.
Yeah.
He was treated like wide receiver 1, which is the reason you drafted him, which was a dire need for the offense. You needed a defense to respect wide receiver 1. So in that way, it worked. The problem was you didn't capitalize on the fact that extra attention, that gravitational pull was going towards Marvin Harrison Jr. The whole game, I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, especially in that second half, look at the extra coverage on Marvin. You know what that smells like out here? Opportunity. And they couldn't cash that in.
Regardless of whatever the score would have been, if the Cardinals had won and Michael Wilson had gone off, Greg Dortch had gone off, Trey McBride, all these other offensive weapons, we still would have been talking the fact that Marvin Harrison Jr. only had 3 targets. However, it would have been a different story of, okay, but you made the best of it. Exactly what your point is, Paul. But part of the problem of Harrison only having 1 catch for 4 yards is, with the exception of Michael Wilson's touchdown, not a factor. Greg Dortch was his most relied upon receiver.
Wide receiver.
Right, wide receiver, right? That they really did rely on James Conner in the passing game. And Conner was...
And McBride had the most targets.
Right. Conner was out wide on a couple of different sets. I just think it's a twofold issue that you need to work on moving forward, of not only getting Harrison more involved, but having the rest of your weapons take advantage when he is double teamed and he is out of a play.
And I'll say this, let's be preemptive. The first time Kyler Murray throws into double coverage trying to force the ball to Marvin and he throws a pick, I'm assuming that would mean nobody's going to argue, what are you doing, Kyler? Why are you throwing into double coverage? Because that's essentially, again, I'm not absolving the Cardinals of, when you have a guy like that, you got to get him the ball. But it's so much more nuanced than everybody wants it to be. And again, I refer back to all those years with Fitz.
Well, it's not just fans citing that. Kyle Vandenbosch, right, one of the Cardinals analysts, 12-year NFL, 3-time Pro Bowler, said in his years with the Lions, they used to tell a young Matthew Stafford, just throw it to him. He's covered, doesn't matter. Throw it to Calvin Johnson.
Kurt Warner used to say that he had to learn that with Fitz.
Yeah. And KVB was like, hey, Calvin Johnson isn't in the Hall of Fame unless Matthew Stafford forced the ball to him, sometimes in double coverage.
Although we won't talk about the fact the Lions never won anything with Calvin Johnson.
So yeah.
Did that help?
Well, you need more than the quarterback and the receiver, which once again comes back to my earlier comment about I was shocked the tight ends in this game on both sides weren't a bigger deciding factor. And I was somewhat shocked that the Cardinals weren't able to run the ball the final 3 quarters. If you're getting that sort of shell coverage and there's an extra guy out of the box ostensibly because they're paying extra attention to Marvin Harrison Jr., then the whole cram it vertical. I'll say this just from an observation on the sideline. And Wolf and I talked about this after the game. There was a lot more of attacking the edges of the box with the run game as opposed to between the tackles. And I'm guessing in the tight end room this week, there's an extra emphasis on the 3 tight ends and their run blocking. And let's see if they can amp that up, make an improvement from week 1 to week 2.
It did feel like a drop-off in a sense. I mean, when you start the game with 6 straight running plays to James Conner, you would think that would translate more, especially again when you bring in the weather as a factor, and the Cardinals had a 17-3 lead.
Not a single snap in the second half from under center.
I'm not going to get over my skis about this because it is 1 week. And when you're looking at big picture, the Cardinals were competitive. Was it as consistent throughout the game? No. It was more, the Cardinals were a lot more competitive and dominating in the first half than they were in the second, and that's something that needs to be addressed. I'm not freaking out over the fact that you have plenty to work on in week 2 before you host the Rams, and finding a way to be more consistent in the run game and not just and maybe that was the game plan of not necessarily going downhill but going more horizontally in the run game, but finding a way to get all of your weapons more involved.
I am curious to know the extent of the injury to Jonah Williams, the right tackle, and what that ultimately means.
Yeah, and
because it didn't look good.
No, it didn't. Look, I sort of hit zoom out on Cardinals cover 2. I said, the 3 axioms of any football game, of any football team. Quarterback, get to the quarterback, protect that quarterback. In the first quarter, en route to a 17-3 lead, all 3 of those were clicking. Your quarterback, you were getting to Josh Allen, strip sack, right? And you were protecting Kyler Murray. Plenty of time to go through his reads, find guys in the passing game. The last 3 quarters, which came in sync with the very last play of the first quarter and the injury to Jonah Williams, things started to change. Cardinals pass protection wasn't what it was earlier in the game, and then all of a sudden, as Jonathan Gannon told us after the game in the radio interview, you got a lot more run blitzes. They started loading the box, that 2 high safety shell coverage. Well, there are 2 things that, to me, I'm not going to declare Kyler all the way back until I see 2 things. Cardinals make those shell coverages pay, the 2 high safeties, and then you just get the downfield passing attack going, period. The stat, and I ripped this off from Craig Grialou, the Cardinals on deep balls, those 10-plus air yards, Cardinals are 0 for 6. Forget deep balls, just downfield passing, period, has to be restored, I think, to the Cardinals offense, at least before you say, you know what, okay, it's everything it can be.
But and again, that's everybody. I mean, Michael Wilson should have made that catch for 20, 25 yards on the very first play in the final drive.
I mean, the kickoff was out of bounds. You started the 40, and then you had a drop on a chunk throw that would have put you in Bill's territory instantly.
Yeah, it's
that's tough.
Even
the ball to Dortch at the very end was actually on the money. He's got one hand ripped down, and he's trying to make a catch with only his right arm. But that ball actually was on the money.
Well, and I know people were trying to figure out why you threw it to Dortch, and I think he had single coverage. He was the guy with single coverage when the blitz happened. So I don't, I don't. Yeah. They got to be better. The quarterback also has to be better. But at the same time, I thought Kyler played a solid game.
I also liked the way he used his legs. It didn't feel like it was forced. That was something that we've heard him say of.
Yes.
He wants to be able to use it when he needs to, but doesn't want that to be what this offense is relying on to be successful. And you got a sense of that, of when he needed to escape pressure or the lane was there for him, he took it. It wasn't forced.
The 24-yard pass to DeMarcado in the first half.
Yep.
That was so awesome because Kyler could have run, and I think once upon a time he would have run, but he decided to stay back there and keep waiting, and eventually came back around to Amari, who was uncovered, and got him a 24-yard pass.
I don't watch the All-22. Dani, are you back to watching the All-22 at all?
Sore subject at the moment. I was able to log in on Monday, and then I tried to log in to watch some things before the podcast on Tuesday, and suddenly my login was requiring me to pay, so it's something I gotta figure out.
Yeah, okay. Well, I didn't know that was a loaded question. The reason I bring it up is just from watching from the sideline, and there's a lot of chaos, and sometimes you have the best seat, sometimes you have the worst, but there were definitely times where the Bills were using a spy, and there were definitely times it didn't matter. Kyler left the dude in the dust. But then I started thinking about it after the game, like Darren says, you start to process things. So wait a minute. If they had a spy on Kyler and there was extra coverage devoted to Marvin Harrison Jr.,
someone's supposed to be open. The math is not mathing.
You got to make that defense pay, right?
Right.
So I think that's the charge to the offense in week 2 and beyond.
And now that they have a look maybe at what defenses are going to do to Marvin Harrison Jr., and maybe that'll give them a better idea of what they can do with their other weapons and find a way for, regardless of who's out there or the number of players out there for Harrison, how can you still get him the ball? Because that should be a priority.
It is funny, though. You could easily see the way that game went, that if you somehow complete that last drive for a touchdown, he doesn't get the ball for whatever reason. And this is such a different discussion. Because then you would have scored 38 points, What was the final score?
34-28.
34-28. Yeah, so you would have scored 36 points and 35 points. Sorry, I can't math. Math isn't mathing. You would have won by a point. You would have had 4 touchdowns without Marvin being a factor. And we go back to what Dani was saying before. Everybody would be like, see, it's
a win-win.
It's a win-win.
Which is what it still can be.
Yeah.
All right.
I know everybody's going to rip on us for being a homer. They're going to listen to this and go, you guys don't know what you're talking about.
So if we look forward, okay, here, Paulie Pigskin Division of Calvisi Consulting says, how about ripping a page right out of the Sean McVay playbook with Cooper Kupp? Do you see this ridiculous stat that in the Sunday night game against the Lions, he traveled a total of 436 yards in pre-snap motion alone?
Whoa.
The second most in a game by any player since 2018.
All right.
By the way, he had 14 catches on 21 targets. How about you take that out of the Rams playbook and you use that with Marvin Harrison Jr., dude constantly in motion?
Okay, here's my question on that, and I'm being completely serious with this. You know how they track how much all these guys run?
Yep.
Because they don't want them overdoing it. Do you count all that motion? Like, that's still running.
Well, what do you mean they don't want him over in a game? Like, what do you mean? There's limits to what?
Oh, yeah. You
mean like league rules or something?
No,
what do you mean?
No,
what
teams.
Yeah.
It's sports science, Paul.
Okay, well, I know Marvin's. It's his second game as a rookie. He's 22 years old.
I'm not saying he can't handle it, but if you run him that much, like how much is he practicing later in the season? Because I'm just saying.
Well, the rookie wall. Paris Johnson Jr. played every snap of every game last year. There's your rookie wall for Paris Johnson Jr. I think it's a player-by-player basis.
Playing every snap and doing well on every snap are two totally different subjects, Paul.
Okay, so now is that a commentary on the play?
It's not a commentary on anything.
Jr.?
I think you're like you right now are.
No, I'm saying
you're not an analytics guy at all.
No, not really.
I
just find it
as long as you play every play, then that's good enough.
Oh no, I'm not saying it's play every play. What I'm saying, my point here is that in anybody who's watched the Cardinals play Cooper Kupp knows he's always in motion.
You're right.
It could be a little cheat motion. It could be from one side of the field to the other.
I'm not fighting you on that.
I mean, every snap, he's in a different spot, different launch point. I mean, Sean McVay does a really good job of making him tough to cover. I'm just wondering if you can rip that off best practices as you try and unlock Marvin Harrison Jr. That's my only point on that. So I throw that out there.
And the point I was making didn't really necessarily say don't do this with Marvin. They could be separate things.
By the way, on the whole Jonah Williams and the offensive line thing, yeah, that's a situation to monitor. And if it's Kelvin Beachum going forward, is there some extra help out there? Not a necessity. Is it Tip Ryman out there? There's a lot more 12 and 13 personnel, as if the Cardinals don't use it enough already. But now you're keeping in someone to help with the edge. And I'll tell you this much, Jared Verse had a nice game against the best offensive line in the game. The Lions boast the best O-line in the game, and the 19th pick overall, the rookie out of Florida State, Jared Verse, went out there, and he had a sack, and he had 6 quarterback pressures. So even though they don't have Aaron Donald, they do have the ability to get to the quarterback, the Rams. So we'll see about that. How about the Cardinals defense? Give me a word or two on the Cardinals defense and what you saw out there, and what do you think Nick Rawls is how is he looking at this, and where is he trying to evolve the defense going into week 2?
I mean, I think they would probably like it to execute a little bit. We got a lot of, quote, there was good and bad, unquote, from Nick Rawls, whatever you were asking him about in any part of the defense today. And I think that's fair. I mean, with all due respect, when I go back to the top of what I was saying, I didn't see anything that surprised me. Was there anything that surprised you?
Sean Murphy Bunting, I thought, being a veteran, a couple of those flags, he's got to know better on that.
But that's kind of his reputation.
Is
right,
it?
not much.
Yeah, maybe I'm just not up enough on SMB.
I think it was more I was pleased to see a few splashes. You see the strip sack by defensive lineman Roy Lopez, and Justin Jones is right there to snatch it up, and then the Cardinals go down. They put 3 points on the board. Mack Wilson Sr. was a name where I a couple times thought that's a good play. Seeing him very quickly get through the gaps and get either to the quarterback, get to the running back for tackle for loss. I thought that seeing Wilson Sr. and Kaiser White as your linebackers was a nice duo, the way that they were advertised to be this offseason.
I think Mac Wilson he played significantly fewer snaps than Kaiser and had the same amount of production, which that doesn't take anything from Kaiser. I just think Mac Wilson played pretty well. I'll say this, in a nutshell for me, the defense. Gannon brought it up after the game, brought it up again Monday, talking about the pass rush and everything. He talked about having a free runner and you can't miss those plays. That was Owen Papo. Came on a blitz, had Josh Allen dead to rights, but kind of like ran. I mean, Josh Allen kind of moved a little bit, but it was almost like Owen Papo was running too fast and didn't really ever get a great hand on him, but he was a free runner.
You got to break down and make the tackle.
Again, I look at that play as a microcosm, not to jump on Papo, but as a microcosm of this defense. You are probably, as a unit, not strong enough to hold teams to 15 points a game. You have to be opportunistic. That means on a play like that, that's got to be a sack. Just like the Bills drove through the Cardinals fairly easily on that one drive, but Roy Lopez made it a moot point because he got there and was opportunistic and they got the turnover. That's how this defense is going to succeed. They're not going to be awesome in terms of stoning other offenses, but if they get a 3rd and long, they got to get off on it. They've got to get some turnovers. And if you get a free run on a quarterback, you got to make it a lot harder on them than it was.
You asked if anything surprised on the defensive side. Can I say it in a really good way? Zaven Collins called his name a lot during the radio broadcast.
Should have had a sack. I don't know if you heard that, Paul.
Yeah, should have. And I just thought it looked like he took that next step at that position in year 2 of being the outside linebacker. So I thought that was a plus. Budda Baker was all over the field again. I mean, between Budda, Zaven, Mac Wilson, and Kaiser White, you had 40 tackles just between those 4 guys. So that was sort of the heartbeat of the defense in that regard. Now, as for what we're going to see in terms of maybe the cornerback rotation, I am curious about that. Especially without Puka Nacua, what does that mean? What can the Cardinals get away with? Kyron Williams, we know what he did last year in a couple of games against the Cardinals. There's a reason he was the 2nd-team All-Pro running back behind Christian McCaffrey. And some of those numbers from a year ago and what he did, in fact, it's right here. I jotted it down real quick. You realize in the first game against the Cardinals, Kyron Williams, 20 for $158, a touchdown. That's 8 yards a carry. Had a long of 31. In the second game, 16 for 143. That's almost 9 yards a carry. Long of 56.
Is my memory serving me correctly that it was last year, I don't remember if it was home or away against the Rams, where the Cardinals in the first half kept them pretty one-dimensional in the air, and then they opened up the second half with
road game.
Like 9 straight run plays on a touchdown.
That was a game in L.A.
Oof.
That might have been the second game of 22, I want to say, but maybe not.
That was 2 years ago?
Yeah,
that wasn't last year?
I think. No, they just came out.
Someone is listening and yelling at me for not having a better memory.
You know what? We need to ramp up the competitive juices here. We talked about evolving from week 1 to week 2, and we're about to experience an addition to the game plan in 3, 2, 1.
It's time for The Wise Guy, the world's fastest growing Cardinals quiz show. The stakes are low, the winner gets absolutely nothing. Here's your hostess with the mostest, Dani Sureck.
Listen to all that applause for me.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. Who is the voice guy? That's what I want to know.
Is that Cody?
That was a nice touch by our guys over there on the other side of the glass producing this. Way to go, Cody and Omo.
I used to co-host a radio show way back in the day by the name of The Wise Guys, so I'm having flashback right now. This is singular, Dani, so do explain. What are we trying to determine here?
The two of you have been covering this team for quite some time, so we're going to keep it...
Enough.
We're going to keep it Ram-centric, since that is the opponent this week.
Here we go.
Rules are simple.
Yep.
I'm going to ask each of you a question, trivia question, from a Cardinals-Rams matchup, and we're going to keep score and see who is most knowledgeable.
Yeah. It's not just beat LA, it's beat the Botox out of LA.
Does anyone have a preference on who goes first? You want to do a thumbnail?
You go ahead and give Paul can go first.
Wow.
Great.
Okay.
Here we go, Paul. You ready for your first?
That's overconfidence by Darren.
Age before beauty.
That's overconfidence by Darren. He's going to pay for that.
Here we go, Paul. Oh my goodness, I love the details. This former 14-time Pro Bowl defensive tackle for the Rams ended up starring in TV shows like Petticoat Junction, Father Murphy, and Little House on the Prairie.
Oh, yes.
Darren throws his arms up. He knows the answer, but
goodness.
it's not his question. Paul?
I could see the guy in Little House on the Prairie with the Ingalls family, and he's got the beard, and oh my
How long does he get for this?
goodness.
I'll count you down from 5.
Oh my goodness.
4.
14-time Pro Bowler?
3.
Oh.
2.
Okay. That was in
1.
the 70s. I don't remember.
Darren, you get the opportunity to steal.
That would be Merlin Olsen.
Correct.
Wait. Merlin or Berlin?
Merlin.
Merlin. Okay.
Correct.
That is correct.
Yes.
Dang it.
Question number 2.
This is for me, right?
This is for Darren.
I just couldn't remember.
The Cardinals clinched the NFC West title in 2008 against the Rams, and the game punctuated by a 99-yard pick six by cornerback Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie.
DRC.
What college did DRC attend?
Was that Tennessee State, Dani?
That is correct.
I would have said Middle Tennessee, so I would have got that wrong anyway.
Darren's got a 2-0
Okay.
lead, Paul. Get
That's
it
cool.
together.
I'm feeling
That's
pretty
cool.
good.
That's
Lock
cool.
in here.
There were 3 teams that came back in week 1 from down 2 scores. So here we go.
Yeah,
Here we go.
Oh, you had to bring that up.
Yeah,
Paul.
Here we go, Paul.
There were 3 teams.
This former St. Louis Cardinals player currently holds the record for the longest non-scoring play in NFL history, set against the Rams in 1972.
Non-scoring play. St. Louis Cardinal, 1972. So if it's the length of the field, I'm going to say Terry Metcalf. Come on!
Darren, opportunity to steal.
Is it Bobby Moore / Ahmad Rashad?
I'm going to look through the glass. Do we take slashes? We do. We get a thumbs up. Congratulations, Darren. Ahmad Rashad versus the LA Rams, December 10th.
All right.
1972, St. Louis Rams.
Just so you know, Bobby Moore is Ahmad Rashad.
That's right. The name changed. That's right. Well, I just wanted to make sure. 98-yard pass from Jim Hart.
Omo, do we ask the 4th question? Or is that a no?
Let me just say, was in the adjoining room when you guys were formulating the
Darren
questions?
actually left the room.
I'm just
sure about that?
I just want everybody to know.
Should we do
that
this just for fun?
You sure the mics weren't on and Darren was listening?
Myself, Paul Coro, and Dan Zeiger did win the Arizona State University Sports Trivia Challenge in 1991.
Do we want to do this next question or save
Here's
it
the
for the next
question.
time? We'll do this next question.
Does
Hang on,
Darren
Paul.
want to go winner take all in the last question?
Does he?
That's a good question. I don't know. This is bonus. I
No.
won.
Okay.
I'm
Here we
taking
go.
the
Here we
win.
go, Darren.
Yes.
Winner take all.
This former Rams defensive end was a finalist for the part of Sam Malone on Cheers, but ended up starring alongside Stephanie Kramer as a LAPD homicide detective in an early 80s television drama.
Yes.
Name the player and the show.
Oh, I know this one.
Fred Dreyer,
Yep.
Hunter.
Correct. Way to go.
I watched Hunter every week
Okay, so
when I was a child.
apparently Darren's been sitting around watching a lot of Nickelodeon and seeing all these 70s
Yeah, we already
shows.
learned that.
Those
Paul
were
doesn't-
those were good questions.
You gonna ask
Elmo.
him about
Paul
Hogan's
doesn't
Heroes
watch
next? I
TV.
mean,
We learned
All in
that
the
last
Family.
week.
Like what else?
Yeah, way to go, Omo. Great
I
questions.
thought this was supposed to be football. We're asking about actors in 1970s and
The
80s.
best part is
TV shows.
about Wise
Where's
Guy
the
is
football?
I know for a fact that these questions, the dates, the answers, not a single one of them Omo looked up online because of his memory and the amount of knowledge he keeps in his brain that he just knows all of these on his own already. I know that.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to thank the Academy, the hostess with the mostest, Dani Sureck,
thank you. We'll
and
keep,
my competitor, Paul Calvisi.
we'll keep a running record, and Darren wins this round.
I mean, Rams trivia. There wasn't a single question about Roman Gabriel. I mean, come on, what a crime!
I would have gotten that too.
I see.
Vince Ferragamo. Do we want to talk about Vince Ferragamo?
Oh my goodness.
Lawrence McCutcheon.
Okay.
Do we want to talk about Lawrence McCutcheon?
I think I used to have that jersey, number 30. What number was
Who
Lawrence
played
McCutcheon?
a Super Bowl with a broken leg, Paul?
Oh yeah, it was a defensive guy.
Yes.
I do remember Jack Youngblood.
Well, there you go.
Oh, see, All right, little redemption.
No, there's no applause for that.
I was in the other. I scored in the others receiving
I don't
votes
want
category.
Paul going into a shell. We're going to
right.
need him this weekend, Dani.
He had to rebuild my confidence a little bit with the Jack Youngblood.
You'll get him next week,
so,
Paul.
Okay.
Those are the former LA Rams, though. These are the current LA Rams now.
Yeah, okay. That's all right. By the way, can I just say, if you want an LA Rams rant, and I'm ready to deliver one after getting beat down right there, that wasn't just beat LA, that was beat down LA, Calvisi style in that trivia. Sean McVay is our new coach, Double Rainbow. Is it okay if we're just sick and tired? Sick and tired of Sean McVay. Not only his win-loss record, which we don't need to go into, but, the soup commercials where all of a sudden he's America's coach and he's coaching up America and he's giving pep talks in the workplace. I don't need it.
Along those lines, Paul, did you see where he not only gave up coaching one of the preseason games to one of his assistants, so his assistant got a chance, but during that game, did live interview with his booth while the game was going on?
Really? Okay, see, there's yet another reason. Roger Goodell, if you're listening, all right, you need to eliminate one more preseason game just based on what Sean McVay, one of the premier head coaches in the league, how he treated that preseason game. Obviously, it's disposable and should be eliminated if he's not even engaged.
We're going to see how good of a coach he is, which we all know he's a great coach. But, I mean,
they're banged up.
The Cardinals want to complain about a couple of their injuries. The Rams got smoked this weekend in terms of injuries.
Yeah, I told Craig Grillo, I said, you know what, when I start whining about, possibly losing Jonah Williams and remind me about the state of the Rams offensive line, they've lost 3, maybe 4 starters when you count the suspension as well to their left tackle for the first 2 games. They're down 2 left tackles. They're down a starting interior guard. So
Puka Nacua, their wide receiver.
So, okay. I mean, look.
I mean, let's face it. If we're talking about what this defense did and what the defensive line might do going forward, I know you were saying you want to see maybe some more from that, Paul. I mean, you're not going to have any excuses here.
I mean, look, there are guys. Put it this way. There are players you added to the Cardinals roster who you didn't get a real good read on in week 1. Both free agents and rookies, correct? That you didn't get a lot of production out of.
That's fair.
For various reasons. Marvin Harrison Jr., Justin Jones, Bilal Nichols, Sean Murphy-Bunting. Jonah Williams got hurt, obviously. Even guys like Tip Ryman seemingly were quiet. Now, his role's in a blocking capacity. Am I breaking down the blocking? No, I'm not. Max Melton, right? Xavier Thomas, non-factor for the snaps that he played. So I would say, in addition to winning the game, which is first, second, and third on any power poll of wants and needs going into week 2, some of these other additions to the team, you'd like to see them have some more easily quantifiable contributions.
It's a very different quarterback matchup, going from Josh Allen, who is very two-dimensional, to Matthew Stafford, who is very not two-dimensional. Now, that doesn't make Stafford any less a quarterback. He is big and strong and powerful and accurate. And defensive coordinator Nick Rawlis said himself, doesn't matter how hard you hit him or how many times you hit him, he's going to get up and he's going to continue to make plays. So it's really going to come down to tight coverage by your secondary and hopefully not having the weapon of Puka Nacua. You can really put a lot of that attention onto Cooper Kupp, who would deserve it even if Nacua was out there. You need to have tight coverage, and you need to force Stafford to hang on to the ball because he's not going to leave the pocket. So you need to be able to force him to hang on to the ball to either throw a bad throw or get in his face.
He's a hell of a player. And, yeah, I mean, again, that's where this offensive line of the Rams is. I'm very curious to see what happens there. I mean, watching the tail end, and we were traveling back from Buffalo, the 3 of us, but watching the tail end of that game, the Rams did some things at the end of that game when they had all the injuries and no Puka Nacua, and that Lions defensive line is no joke. So, which speaking of that, that's the next team the Cardinals play after the Rams. So,
but you're right, Dani. Matthew Stafford has some of that Carson Palmer in him. He'll hang in the pocket to the very last second. He is willing and able to take a shot and get the pass away.
He's not going to get in his head about hanging on to the ball and feeling like he needs to force it out.
No, he won't get skittish in the pocket. No. And, I took a quick look at his stat line against the Cardinals since he became the Rams quarterback last year. 5 touchdowns, 1 pick. His 2 passer ratings, 107, 121. In 5 games, he missed 1 with injury. 5 games as Rams starting quarterback against the Cardinals, 10 touchdowns, 2 picks. So he's been very good in this series. In this matchup, he has been excellent. And guys, you know this, guys who have played with him in Detroit, the Matt Praters of the world, they rave about him, and they think he's underrated. If Josh Allen was voted most overrated, Matthew Stafford, for all the acclaim and the Super Bowl, might still be underrated. A lot of those guys consider him Patrick Mahomes before Patrick Mahomes with all the arm talent and the arm angles.
I do think that sometimes people underrate him because I think he played in Detroit for a lot of mediocre teams.
Yep.
He did win the Super Bowl, but everybody kind of I don't know, overlooked that a little bit or whatever it was. I just know that the Cardinals have had a recent history of struggles against the Rams and Sean McVay in their own building. It's your home opener. You're going against a division foe. You did not win a division game last year. This is a game that, I know we're only 2 games in, becomes very, very crucial.
And with the Lions coming in, arguably a top 3 team in the NFL with the best offensive line in the game, right? This becomes a very important game in more ways than one. Speaking of games, where did we end up in the picks from week 1? Please don't declare Darren a winner again.
We shared that in the podcast last week, right? That we were going to off air. All 3 of us were going to
pick games.
Yes, without telling each other.
Without the Cardinal. We're picking the games.
15 games.
15 games.
No Cardinals.
We won't do Cardinals games. So, So we had that this week.
So I went 10-5. Dani?
I also went 10-5.
So that was obviously better than Darren because Darren went
12-3.
Ooh, so Darren is 2-0 against you, Paul.
Okay, so because it can always get worse, it just did. Okay, well,
I'm feeling pretty good about that.
It's all right. It's once again
It's week 1. It's okay. Shake off the rust.
Yeah, September is a new August, as I like to say. You don't get many reps in August, so there's a lot of things you find out about your team, and then you make adjustments accordingly in September.
Is that like 60 is the new 40?
Sorta. Yeah, I went with that last year. I know it sounded good. I don't know if there's much real truth to it, but I like it. In these days where a lot of teams who don't play a lot of starters in August, I say September's a new August.
I will say this, I know it sounds hollow, but I'm stunned that I did that well. I didn't write down who my picks were, but oftentimes I'm actually stunned all 3 of us did that well because usually the first week has all these crazy outcomes, which does that mean there just weren't crazy outcomes?
I mean, I'll be honest, one of mine was Cincinnati.
So was one of my losses was definitely Cincinnati.
That's considered crazy.
Yeah. No, the crazy outcome was we actually got more right than wrong. That was the craziness of week 1. And that'll do it.
Well, no.
2 things.
We got 2 big things we haven't touched on.
What?
One is your key.
One of them.
What's your key this week?
Well,
then there's 3 things we haven't.
Okay.
There's 3 things we haven't done.
I already named names, but I'm as good as Matthew Stafford is. Kyren Williams. It starts with stopping the run. You couldn't stop the man a year ago. He averaged 7 and 9 yards a carry in the 2 games. Stop Kyren Williams.
Okay, you forgot this cool.
Oh, that's right.
On our rundown.
Okay, all right, here we go.
And then I'll have one thing to wrap up.
Okay,
we'll do that in a minute.
All right, so Dani, you're familiar with this poll here. This was done by who? Doesn't matter. You saw this online.
It's right there, rotogrinders.com or something.
All right,
I got an email about it.
And they surveyed over 3,000 NFL fans.
Yes.
Okay, and the question...
Now, I don't know how many were actually Cardinal fans.
Okay, all right. So, actually, they determined, this is the question, what would Arizona Cardinal fans be willing to give up in return for a Super Bowl victory? Okay. Now... this is very interesting. Dani, if you want to take the lead on this, go ahead.
Sure. Should I list what the options are?
Well, yeah. What stands out to you?
The fact that the highest rated of what a Cardinals fan would give up for the Super Bowl is 32%, a date with your celebrity crush. Are we under the assumption that I'm guaranteed a date with my celebrity crush if I'm willing to give it up? Of course I'm going to vote for that if that's not happening.
I don't know. Who's your celebrity crush,
That's not
Dani?
important. I will say, if I had to agree with any of these, last ever concert of your favorite artist, your honeymoon, a family wedding, your own wedding, retirement savings, your child being born. For me, it's pretty easy. I would go with the last ever concert of your favorite artist, which 25% of the fans voted for.
Well, the early ones on this is okay, of course you're willing to give up a winning bet of $2,000. So would you be willing to give up $2,000.
If I already don't have $2,000, then sure.
Now,
don't
if
give
you're
it
giving
to
up
me.
a family wedding,
Depends on the family member.
Your marriage?
Might
Now-
be willing.
you're willing to give up your marriage. How does your wife feel about
Can
that?
I ask you, how does giving up a family wedding rate the same as giving up your own wedding?
No, here's the
right?
better part.
Both are, and giving up your marriage, all rated 14%.
There are fewer people that are willing to give up their annual bonus than your marriage or your own wedding. Who are we interviewing here?
And the fact that they actually put your child being born on this, that's just criminal itself, because it really exposes the pathological percentage of people
Even
who put too much into football, period.
5%. This is
Give
just
up your
funny.
retirement
If you don't have
savings.
$2,000, Dani, how do you have any retirement savings? So there's that.
Well, it's all money she doesn't know. It just goes in automatically. Automatic deduction.
The
every month.
funeral of a close family member. How can you, in good conscience, if it's a close family member, vote yes, I'd be willing to give that up for a Super Bowl?
Well, you haven't won a Super Bowl, so you don't know. So
These are all moot
Yeah.
points.
Would you be willing to give up your honeymoon?
No.
I mean,
well, you still have yours to look forward to. Ours is all in the past,
Yeah.
anyways.
guess what? I'm married. I'm married, and I still have my honeymoon to look forward to. It's a long story.
Oh,
Don't ask my
okay.
wife about that one.
Sounds
okay?
like the next one.
Yeah,
All right,
don't
before we go, Friday night, there was a bunch of us at a local sports bar in Buffalo,
Okay.
catching the end of the stream of the Green Bay Philadelphia game.
Yep.
And because of how this bar was set up, which was pretty full and had a lot of Cardinal fans in it.
The Red Sea was all over this Buffalo
yes.
trip.
So there was probably about 10 of us, 12 of us, I don't know. But the only spot that was really had any kind of room for us to kind of come together was off the corner of the bar. Like you have the long bar and then it has the side. There was a gentleman sitting by himself, drinking, watching the games. And we all kind of ended up hovering around him.
We were like eating around him, ordering drinks around him, standing
talking around him.
Yeah.
But
felt
he
bad.
had been by himself, and then he definitely wasn't by himself anymore. So we were there for, I don't know, we were there for a good half hour, 45 minutes. And at some point, and I in my head, I'm thinking, I feel bad that we're crowding this guy. And at one point, he turns around and he goes, "Is your name Darren?" And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, "Can I get my picture with you?" And I'm like, and before I said anything else, he's like, "I listen to the podcast all the time, watch the podcast all the time. I love it, all this stuff." And I said to him, "I apologize. I just thought you were a random Buffalo person standing here, and I felt bad that we were crowding you." And it turns out he's from Nashville. His name is Dusty, and he came for the game. And he was there with a buddy, although the buddy decided not to go out, so he was hanging out this thing. So we take a picture, and I said, "So you said you listened to the podcast?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Do you realize that right there," and literally Dani was talking to Kyle Deroni right next to him about a foot away with her back to him. I said, "That's Dani Sureck right there." And I tap her on the shoulder. And he's like, "She is," and got all excited to meet Dani, which all of us do on a daily basis, but... So we want to shout out Dusty.
Yeah, shout out
and
to
thank you
Dusty for listening and allowing us to invade your space at the bar in Buffalo.
And we apologize.
And you guys picked up his tab as a result of that, correct?
Oh, we did not do that.
Oh,
Next time.
Although I might have bought some combine remembrance shots for a couple of us.
Good times.
And not Dusty.
Well, Dusty wasn't with us at the combine.
Yeah, he doesn't share the same love for Screwball.
And that's a walk-off comment, if I've ever heard one, on Cardinals Underground, brought to you by Pacific Office Automation.